I woke up after 3 years in a coma, only to discover that my younger sister had told my son I was gone forever. Now, he doesn't recognize me, and calls her mom. I woke up to a blinding white light and the overwhelming smell of antiseptic. My mind was blank, my mouth dry, and my body felt crushed beneath the weight of 100 unnamed memories. A nurse jumped in surprise when she saw my eyes open and rushed out in panic to get the doctor. I tried to speak, but only weak, muffled sounds came out. My throat felt raw, and I couldn't move my arms or legs. All I could do was breathe shakily, terrified because I had no idea what had happened. The doctor entered, his expression a mix of shock and caution. "She's awake, after nearly 3 years in a vegetative state," he said, as if he couldn't believe his own words. I wanted to ask, where have I been for the past 3 years? I looked around the unfamiliar hospital room, searching for a familiar face, but there was no husband, no family, no one calling my name. A creeping fear began to rise in my chest. Was I truly nobody? When I tried to move a finger, a sharp pain shot down my spine, making me burst into tears. The tears weren't from physical pain, but from a deep, invisible loss that clawed at my heart. I didn't remember who I was, but something inside me knew I had lost something huge. Another doctor came in and told me my name was Rachel Thompson. I stared at him like he was talking about a stranger. But when he mentioned a car crash, an image flickered in my mind, screeching brakes, headlights, then darkness. "Your husband didn't make it, and you fell into a deep coma at the scene," the doctor continued, his voice softening. I bit my lip, trying not to scream from the pain rising in my chest. One question rang out silently inside me. What about my child? I asked urgently, did I have a child? Was I a mother? But they just exchanged silent glances before a nurse quietly answered, "We didn't find any record of a child." Only one relative came forward, Emily Thompson. That name lit a spark in a forgotten corner of my memory. Emily, my sister. Her name swept through my mind like a breeze cutting through fog. I remembered we used to be close, and that one day I had left my child with her. But when? And what happened after that? I was transferred to the rehabilitation unit, where I began relearning how to hold a spoon, how to walk, and how to survive with fractured memories. In my broken sleep, I kept seeing a little boy in my lap, his tiny arms wrapped tightly around my neck. Each time I woke up, my heart ached because I didn't know if that child was real or just a dream. I started asking questions every day, to the doctors, to the nurses, and to myself. But the more I asked, the more frightening the silence became. Only one answer was ever repeated. Emily is the only one who stayed in contact. She's been covering all the medical expenses. I wondered, why hadn't my sister come to see me once in 3 years? If I was her sister, if I'd had a child, why didn't anyone come looking for me? I felt like a piece of memory that someone had deliberately erased. During my recovery, fragments of memories began to surface. One sunny afternoon, I held a newborn in my arms and sang softly by a window. I couldn't remember the baby's name, but I remembered the warmth of their skin against my chest, real, soft, and filled with love. I told the doctor, I was a mother, I'm sure of it. He looked at me and gave a slow nod. Maybe, but there's no record of any child in your file. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I asked to see all of my personal documents. In them, I found the address Emily had listed when she signed the guardianship papers. A spark of hope ignited. If I could find my sister, I could find the truth. My memory might be lost, but my heart had not forgotten. After being medically cleared for basic living functions, I was discharged to a relative's care. With no one else left, I chose to go to Emily's house, the only person still connected to me. My heart pounded with hope that I might recover a piece of my lost life. The taxi stopped in front of a quiet suburban home. My hands trembled as I knocked on the door. When it opened, Emily stood there, eyes wide like she'd seen a ghost. After a stunned moment, she gasped, You're alive?" I nodded weakly, my voice hoarse. I was just discharged. Emily took a step back, clearly struggling to process the shock. Inside the house, the sound of a child's laughter echoed, a sound that made every cell in my body vibrate. I turned toward the noise and saw a little boy, about 3 years old, playing with toy cars on the carpet. He looked up at me, big, dark eyes, and something in them was hauntingly familiar. I stood frozen, unable to speak, as Emily quickly stepped in front of him, blocking my view. I tried to steady myself. "Whose child is that?" Emily forced a smile. "Mine. His name is Liam." That name struck me like a blade to the heart, because I had whispered that same name in my deepest coma dreams. I swallowed hard, hiding my trembling hands beneath a sofa cushion. Liam, that name couldn't be a coincidence. I had wanted to name my son that, before the accident ever happened. Emily invited me in, pretending everything was normal, but I could see the unease in every movement, the way her eyes avoided mine, the stiffness in her voice. And I was shaking, with fear, and with a determination to uncover the truth. Liam walked up to me, holding a red toy car. He looked at me for a moment, then suddenly said, "You look like the lady from my dream." I froze, my heart skipping a beat. My son dreamed about me? I gently asked, what was the dream like? He answered, a lady sang me to sleep and held me just like you do. Behind him, Emily cleared her throat softly and picked Liam up, carrying him into another room. I sat there, my heart crushed by a pain I couldn't explain. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went through the old phone the hospital had returned to me. Most of the data was corrupted, but a few photos remained. In one of them, I was holding a sleeping baby. The name tag on his onesie read, Liam Thompson. I held my breath and zoomed in, the ears, the nose, the smile. It was the same little boy from today. I didn't need a DNA test to know I had given birth to him. But how could my sister claim to be his mother? The next day, I cautiously asked Emily, I used to have a child, didn't I? She paused, then forced a laugh. You're just tired, probably remembering things wrong. But I couldn't even fake a smile. My heart knew this was no mistake. I asked Emily if I could stay a few more days to help with recovery. She agreed reluctantly, her eyes wary. From that moment, I began observing everything, the way she talked to Liam, the documents she tucked away in drawers. One afternoon, while Emily was out grocery shopping, I slipped into her room. In a bottom drawer of her cabinet, I found a folder. Liam's birth certificate, and my heart sank when I saw the word mother. Emily Thompson. I collapsed to the floor, the paper trembling in my hands. Emily's name was listed as the mother, no father, no mention of me. It felt like someone had squeezed my heart with the cold hand of deception. I flipped through the other pages, immunization records, preschool registration, all under Emily's name. Everything was perfectly arranged, as if I had never existed. I hadn't just been replaced, I had been erased. I didn't cry. Instead, a chilling stillness spread through my bones. Part of me wanted to scream, to confront Emily on the spot. But another part whispered, not yet. You need undeniable proof. I carefully took photos of the documents and emailed copies to my personal account. Then I returned everything to its original place, making sure it looked untouched. Emily couldn't suspect anything, not until I could legally defend the truth. The next day, I quietly collected a strand of Liam's hair from his pillow in the living room. I took one of my own and sealed both in an envelope. Only one thought remained in my mind. I need a DNA test as soon as possible. I sent the samples to a private lab far outside the city, somewhere no one knew who I was. When I stepped out of the post office, my heart raced, not out of fear, but hope. Hope that everything I had felt in my heart wasn't just an illusion. The days waiting for the results were the longest of my life. Liam continued calling Emily, Mom, but every time he looked at me, there was a strange light in his eyes. One evening, he whispered, You smell like the dream. I smiled shakily and pulled him closer. What did you see in that dream? Liam thought for a second, then said, I was sleeping on someone's chest. Their hands were really warm, and they sang my favorite lullaby. I squeezed his little hand, struggling not to cry. I began keeping a daily journal, everything Liam said, every strange behavior from Emily. I needed all of it, not just to build a case, but to prove to my son that I never abandoned him, that I had always been trying to come back. And then, on a rainy morning, the envelope with the DNA results arrived in the mailbox. I carried it inside, closed the door, and took a deep breath. My eyes locked on the bolded words, Mother, child match 99.9%. My heart exploded, equal parts pain and overwhelming relief. I sat frozen in the chair, the paper burning in my hands. I had always known, but now it wasn't just a feeling, it was proof. My son was living under a false name, calling someone else Mom. I stepped into the backyard, taking deep breaths to keep myself from screaming at Emily the moment she walked in. But the fury inside me smoldered, rising from my chest to my throat. I couldn't believe that the girl who once shared a bed with me, who held my hand as I gave birth, had done this. That night, I knocked on Emily's door once Liam had gone to bed. I need to ask you something, I said, my voice firmer than it had been in days. Emily sat at the kitchen table, her eyes avoiding mine, like she already knew what was coming. I laid the DNA test on the table, calm but deliberate. How do you want to explain this? I asked, my voice low. Emily stared at the words, her face draining of color. After a long, tense silence, she whispered, I thought you were dead. I've raised him since he was 6 months old. I can't let him go. I cut her off. You can care for him, but you don't get to erase me. You're his aunt, Emily, not his mother. Emily broke down, gripping her hands together. I can't have kids, and when he was with me, everything finally made sense. I thought you were never coming back. I looked at her, not angry anymore, just deeply heartbroken. You can want a family, but not by stealing someone else's. She buried her face in her arms, sobbing like a child who had broken her favorite toy. But I was no longer the older sister who always gave in. I had to fight for justice, not just for me, but for the little boy living inside a lie. That night, I quietly called the lawyer my doctor had once recommended during my recovery. I have proof that my son's records were falsified, and that my sister is claiming him as her own, I said. On the other end, the lawyer replied firmly, If you're ready, I'll I'll represent you. But be prepared, this won't be easy. I hung up and sat still for a long time in the dark living room. Upstairs, Liam was sleeping, trusting someone who didn't give birth to him. I whispered to myself, I'll bring you home, not to tear things apart, but so you'll know who you truly are. The next morning, I walked into the lawyer's office with everything in hand: birth certificate, old photos, DNA test results. She was a middle-aged woman, sharp-eyed but with a calm voice. She reviewed each document, nodding slowly. This is a serious case of legal identity fraud, she said. I told her everything, from the accident, the amnesia, to discovering that Emily had changed my son's identity. Each word burned in my throat, but I kept going. Because I knew that if I stayed silent, my son would grow up inside a lie. What do you want? The lawyer asked plainly. Without hesitation, I answered, I want my parental rights back, and I want my son to know the truth. She nodded. Good. But remember, family court protects the child's best interests, not the adult's emotions. On the day I filed the petition, my hands trembled as I signed my name. Part of me still hurt, because Emily wasn't just someone who betrayed me. She was my sister. But the other part was stronger. I was a mother, and my son deserved to live his truth. 2 days later, Emily received the court summons. She stormed into my room, threw the paper on the table. You really want to take him away from me? She shouted. I looked at her, calm. I'm not taking him, I'm reclaiming him. There's a difference. Emily collapsed onto a chair, screaming. I raised him for 3 years. I stayed up with him when he had fevers. I taught him to say his first word, Mommy. I stood silent. It hurt, but I couldn't deny the truth. You may have raised him, but you didn't give birth to him. The atmosphere in the house turned heavy, like stones pressing on our chests. Liam could feel it. He laughed less, glanced between me and Emily with worried eyes. I tried to act normal, but every time I saw him shrink into himself, my heart ached. One evening, while I was folding Liam's clothes, he walked into the room. Miss Rachel, why does Mommy cry all the time? He asked, his big dark eyes fixed on me. I froze, then sat down and held him close. Because there are things adults kept from you, and now they're trying to make them right. Liam rested his head on my chest. I don't really understand, but when I'm with you, I feel warm. Like when I was little, even though I don't remember it well. Tears spilled down my face, soaking his hair. That's okay, I'll help you remember, one little piece at a time, I promise. The first hearing took place in a small family courtroom. I sat beside my lawyer. Across from me, Emily looked exhausted, her eyes red but still defiant. Liam wasn't present. The court had decided to shield him from the initial legal stress. The judge was an older man, with a deep, calm voice. We are talking about a child here, not a possession, he said firmly at the start. I clenched my hands on my lap, struggling to stay composed, even as my heart thundered. My lawyer presented everything: the DNA test, hospital records, memory recovery notes, and the falsified documents. Emily didn't argue. She just lowered her head, tears falling silently. I didn't do it out of malice, she whispered. I just couldn't lose him. The judge looked at her intently. You cannot adopt a child without legal consent, and certainly not replace his birth mother with silence. Emily sobbed. I don't know how to fix it anymore. Her voice was barely a whisper, a quiet surrender. The court issued a temporary ruling. I would have regular visitation with Liam, under the supervision of a child psychologist. A small weight lifted from my chest. At least now I had a chance to be near my son again. But I also knew this was only the beginning of a long road. The first visit was held in a family care center's playroom. Liam walked in, hugging a teddy bear, looking at me like I was both familiar and strange. I crouched down and smiled. Hi there, can I play Legos with you? He hesitated at first, but eventually nodded. We built houses, cars, and even a plastic dinosaur. Each time I spoke, Liam looked at me closely, as if comparing me to a fuzzy image in his memory. I reached into my bag and pulled out a pale blue silk scarf, the one I used to wear when he was a baby. Do you remember this? I asked softly. Liam touched it, furrowed his brow. I'm not sure, but it feels warm. The psychologist standing behind us nodded, jotting down notes. A bond was slowly reforming, fragile, but real. I knew I couldn't rush it. But I believed that no lie, no matter how long it lasted, could ever erase a mother's love. During the next few sessions, Liam started to open up more. He asked me strange little questions. Did you ever sing lullabies? Or, do you know I like warm milk? Each one pierced my heart because my child was reaching for memories someone had stolen. One day, I brought an old stuffed rabbit, the toy I used to keep in his crib when he was a newborn. Liam stared at it for a long time, then suddenly hugged it tightly. I've seen this bunny in a dream, he whispered, his voice trembling. The psychologist asked gently, How do you feel when you're with Miss Rachel? Liam replied in a soft voice, It feels like my old home, but lighter, softer. I turned away to wipe my tears, not wanting him to see me break. Meanwhile, Emily began to spiral emotionally. She asked the court to reduce her interactions with me, saying she couldn't handle it anymore. But the judge denied the request. This was still the investigation phase, and everyone needed to cooperate. I noticed she had lost a lot of weight, her hair was messy, and her eyes were sunken. Once, I caught Emily sitting in the car in our front yard, crying alone. No matter how angry I was at her, I couldn't deny one thing. She had truly loved and cared for my son for 3 years. The attorney suggested I write a personal statement for the court about what I wished for Liam. I stayed up all night writing about how I felt waking up to hear my child call someone else, Mom, and the pain of discovering my own sister had hidden everything from me. But at the end of the letter, I wrote, I don't want to take away the bond they share, I just want my son to know the truth. One day, Liam suddenly asked me, why do I have 2 moms? That simple question made my heart stop for a few seconds. I pulled him into my arms and gently replied, because you have one mom who gave birth to you, and one who took care of you when I couldn't be there. Liam didn't say anything. He just nodded slightly and nuzzled into my shoulder. In that moment I knew. He didn't need to understand everything right away, as long as he could feel love from both sides. And I would stay, no matter what, not to win, but to be present. After nearly 2 months, the court-appointed psychologist submitted her report. One line stood out. The child is gradually re-establishing a bond with his biological mother, driven by natural emotional responses, not coercion. After reading it, I clenched my fists. It was time to face the final hearing. The last court session was scheduled for a cloudy Monday morning. I wore a simple light blue dress, the same shade as the scarf Liam once recognized. Emily sat across the courtroom, pale, her hands tightly clasped as if holding herself together. The judge flipped through the files, speaking slowly but firmly. We have reviewed the legal evidence, psychological reports, and testimonies from both parties. The room fell silent. I gripped my lawyer's hand under the table. There is no doubt about the biological identity. Ms. Rachel is the biological mother of Liam, he said. Emily bowed her head, her body trembling slightly. I looked at her, not with anger, but with a hollow ache that seemed to consume us both. The judge continued. However, the court also acknowledges the caregiving role, emotional attachment, and special bond between Ms. Emily and the child. A quiet stillness spread through the room. I knew there would be no complete winner. The court grants full legal custody to Ms. Rachel Thompson, he announced. However, Ms. Emily will retain visitation rights and co-parenting involvement under a supported agreement. I closed my eyes, part of me felt lighter, the other part still in turmoil. Emily didn't react as dramatically as I'd feared. She just gave a quiet nod, her tears falling silently. I just want him to be happy, she whispered to the judge, though it sounded more like she was speaking to herself. I believed her. At least in that moment, it was genuine. After the hearing, I walked into the lobby and saw Liam waiting with the social worker. He ran toward me, threw his arms around me, and buried his face in my stomach like a little bear. Mom, does this mean we get to live together now? He asked, and his words lodged in my throat. I hugged him tightly and whispered, yes, sweetheart, you're going home, your real home. And for the first time in this long journey, I felt like I was truly back, not as a victim, but as a mother who had found what mattered most. In the first days living together again, I spent nearly all my time just being with Liam. We made breakfast together, watered the plants, and told bedtime stories. He didn't call me Mom right away, but the way he looked at me said everything. At first, Liam still mentioned Emily in passing. Mom Emily used to make pancakes every Sunday, or Mom Emily would sing Twinkle Twinkle to me. I didn't interrupt or deny it, I just smiled and said, well, I can learn that song and sing it to you too. I understood. To earn my son's love again, I didn't need to erase the past. I just needed to patiently show up in the present. And every time he rested his head on my shoulder without hesitation, I knew I was on the right path. No forcing, no fighting, just love. One day, Liam was drawing at the kitchen table, a picture of a house, 2 grown-ups, and a child in the middle. Who's this? I asked. He answered softly. Mom Rachel, Mom Emily, and me. My heart clenched, pain and warmth tangled together. Emily slowly re-entered our lives, not as an adversary, but as part of my son's new reality. She visited every weekend, bringing muffins, comic books, and a smile that no longer felt forced. She no longer called herself Mom, just Aunt Em. I saw a softened sadness in her eyes, like someone who had walked through a storm and learned how to let go. Once, as I poured her tea, Emily quietly said, thank you for not shutting me out. I looked at her gently and said, because you loved him, genuinely. We began learning how to co-parent, not out of bitterness, but through compromise and mutual respect. Liam had 2 women who were always there for him, even if their roles were different. And he didn't have to choose between us. That brought him more peace than any court ruling ever could. One night, while I was putting Liam to bed, he turned to me and whispered, I miss the smell of your shirt. It's the safest smell in the whole world. Tears welled up as I pulled him close, overwhelmed by the quiet joy of a mother who had once lost everything. I realized, the truth can be painful, but if we're brave enough to face it, it can lead to healing. And the bond between a mother and child, even if broken by accident, betrayal, or time, can still find its way back. One Sunday morning, as I was making pancakes, Liam ran over and wrapped his arms around my waist. "Mom, I had a dream I was really little and you were carrying me in the sunshine," he said. My hands froze. I bent down and hugged him tightly, tears spilling, because that dream was actually my memory. The memories my child once lost, replaced by someone else's story, are now slowly returning, like a quiet stream. No force, no competition, just genuine love. That's the one thing that can't be faked. That day, Emily and I took Liam to the park together, something simple, yet once unimaginable. She no longer held that guarded look. Instead, she quietly watched the two of us like a companion, not a rival. Maybe we'll never go back to what we once were, but we're no longer enemies. As Liam ran off chasing butterflies, Emily stood next to me and softly asked, "Do you still hate me?" I sighed and looked toward my son. "I did, but now, I'm just grateful you didn't abandon my child during the years I couldn't be there." Her eyes welled up, and she gave a small nod. We didn't need to say anything more. Sometimes silence is the deepest form of forgiveness. And my son, he became the bridge between two broken halves of a family. That night, as I read Liam a bedtime story, he asked, "Mom, if you had a fairy godmother, what would you wish for?" I held him close and smiled gently. "I'd wish to go back 3 years so I'd never have to leave you." Liam whispered, "You don't need a fairy, Mom, you're here now." I realized then, what's been lost doesn't always return in its original form. But real love, when protected, can heal even the deepest cracks. And sometimes, it's the child who forgives the adults first. One day, Liam drew a new picture. 2 moms standing on either side of a heart, and him in the middle. I stuck it on the fridge, a small piece of evidence from a long journey. Not a perfect one, but an honest one. I've started writing this story, not to seek pity or expose anyone, but to preserve a piece of truth for myself and for my son. Because truth isn't always easy to swallow, but if we're brave enough to face it, it can become light. And to anyone who's ever been lied to, had their role as a mother stolen, or been treated as if they died in someone else's heart, I want to say, you are not alone. Stand up. Trust your instincts and your love, because the truth, no matter how deeply buried, will always find its way back. One late autumn afternoon, Liam and I sat under the blazing red maple tree behind our house. He lay with his head on my lap, fidgeting with the baby bracelet I had kept for 3 years. "Mom," he asked, "were you sad when I didn't remember you?" I gently stroked his hair and smiled. "I was. But I knew it wasn't your fault. I was just sad that I wasn't there when you needed me, and I've been trying every day since to come back to you." Liam stayed quiet for a moment, then whispered, "Don't go anywhere again, okay?" I pulled him into my arms, feeling his heartbeat sync with mine. "Never again, baby, I'm here, always." From a distance, Emily watched us, then quietly turned away. She was no longer the one hiding things. She had become a part of Liam's memories. She may have made mistakes, but she chose to end things with the truth, and that, in itself, deserves respect. I know my story isn't special, but it's real. And if I hadn't had the courage to face the truth, I might have lost my son forever. Not by death, but by silence. Some battles aren't fought with guns, but in courtrooms, in childhood memories, and in twisted words. But if you know who you are, and what you love, don't be afraid to speak up. Sometimes just one brave step can bring your whole world back. I used to think I had died in the eyes of others, but the truth is, I was just forgotten. And this journey back to life, not through flesh and blood, but through truth, that's the part worth telling. If you've ever had something important stolen from you, a child, an identity, a piece of yourself, remember this. You have the right to reclaim it, and it is never too late to begin again. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs the courage to stand up for the truth. Protect what's yours. Don't let others define you through your silence.